Hello, everybody! If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Tyler. What's up, dude?
Good. I'm bopping.
Yeah.
Jittery.
We were talking about it
Excited to
before
be
show.
here.
There's a lot of energy tonight. Battle Tactics talking about this has got everyone hyped up because it's finally time. We've been dancing around this subject for too long, so tonight we answer the question, are battle tactics good or bad? Also joining us for the first time on the show, it's Nick. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Howdy, I'm doing great. Happy to be here, and I'm super excited about the amount of passion that people are showing about battle tactics and the grenade you've unleashed with this.
Oh, this is we'll get into it for sure. This is going to be a real high energy show for sure. So tuck in, everyone. This one's going to be fun. I look forward to a lot of your comments in the chat. I look forward to people voicing the exact opposite opinions, one right after the other. It's going to be a fun time. By the way, Nick, shout out on those awesome cabinets behind you. Love them. That's such a great background. Those are great looking cabinets that set up. So dig it. Tom has very similar cabinets. So basically what I'm saying is you could just replace Tom and I don't think anyone would notice and it'd be fine. All right. So, Tyler, let's start with some news, buddy. What do we got?
News. Everybody's favorite segment, Rumor Engine. This is actually potentially, maybe, possibly an interesting Rumor Engine image. All right, so these little dots on... Let's see, what are those dots?
They're Slaanesh bumps.
Slaanesh? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm starting up and I'm thinking I'd seen them on Slaanesh before.
Yep.
So maybe a warband? Maybe, what are we thinking?
I assume some kind of Warcry. Like, we saw... I assume some kind of Warcry warband is what I assume, and I'll tell you why I think that. We saw the other little leg plates, which could have been either Doc or Slaanesh or something like that before, and I think those two are the same image, like the fancy leg greaves. I think this is the sword to that particular character or somebody in that warband. The reason I think it's Slaanesh is pretty simple. I suspect in this season of Warcry we'll see some more god aligned warbands at some point. I know they weren't in the Slaves to Darkness thing we saw. It could also be Underworlds, like the next season of Underworlds. I would also vote that. So either of those are certainly possible. But the point being is that we saw the Nurgle aligned warband, so it's not that beyond the pale that sometime next year, after the Slaves to Darkness book is going to come out, that we get a Slaanesh Warcry warband, or that we get another Slaanesh Underworlds warband, or something like that.
There's the outside chance that this is a kind of a dark elf themed warband or something along those lines. Slaanesh has a lot of those same influences.
Yeah, they also like the same like leather gloves. They'd also there's a couple other old dark elf characters that have these same swords. They use the same greaves, so it wouldn't be that shocking to also see it finally be like the if we predict Umbraneth every single time, eventually we'll be right and we can go called it. You know, even though all the people who say it's going to be Umbraneth have said that about 15 different warbands or armies, and it's never them. You know. They are the lupus of sort of rumor engines at this point, but could be, certainly. They always remain ever the boogeyman. I agree. All right, cool. What else? It's one of those two things, though, I feel almost assured in saying, right? Like, it's cool. So, could be a good warband. Good-looking warband.
Okay, we had an article this week on organized play returning. Starting with Warhammer 40,000, so it sounds like the organized play kit for them is on its way here pretty soon. It will support up to 32 participants. We're going to have secondary objective cards. We're going to get some apparently fairly fancy mysterious terrain tokens.
Yeah.
Personally, I never use, but whatever. And we've got some nice trophies on the way, certificates. What else did they have here? I didn't see, let's see, just a few weeks later. So yeah, whenever this new...
Like they're going to launch it for all of them. They talked about kits for everything. 40k, AOS, Warcry, Underworlds, like the whole kill team, the whole shooting match is getting these, right? And yeah, there's these there are these all-in-one packs that the stores can get. They'll send one out. I think the stores can get more, but it has like, you know, stuff to facilitate running organized play events in the stores. So cool. Good. Glad to hear we're you know, the world is healing, I guess. So it's fine.
These look good.
Yeah, cool looking trophies. I don't know how. I agree with you, Nick. How often do you use mysterious terrain, like the current pack of
Hopefully
6?
never. Yeah, we've done it a few times and didn't really like it. It was either incredibly swingy if you get one of the pieces that matters, or it was just clutter that we didn't want to deal with most of the time.
Yep, same. It's a problem. They we've talked about this, that they should have. We did a whole show dedicated to redesigning the mysterious terrain and how to make it actually interesting. And yet here we are.
And meanwhile, they added some great terrain rules that don't get used: impassable, obscuring, garrisonable. Nobody seems to use those at all.
Right. The actual good terrain rules that could formulate interesting competitive play and should be like in, say, an organized play pack that comes out or something like that, which again, 40K does have that thing. I'm not sure why AOS doesn't. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. By the way, that also lets them do updates specifically to just organized play and not touch all of match play necessarily, which is also an advantage. But at any rate, cool beans. What's our next news item?
All right, White Dwarf 477 got previewed this week. Cheetah Courts are getting their Tome Celestial. Gonna get a new war scroll for the Charnel Throne, faction terrain. And Nick, you mentioned they're gonna have a heroic action, you've heard?
Yeah, heroic action was one of the things listed.
Okay. But yeah, it sounds like they're not gonna get a whole lot.
They called it a hefty update, whatever that means.
Well, see, the fact that they're getting their terrain update, you never know then, right? Could be the most impactful thing ever, could be nothing. A single, I don't have a lot of faith in a single heroic action. Could be cool. You can do a lot with a heroic action if they wanted to. It could be like, use this heroic action, and if this hero is still alive at the end of the turn, you win the game. Like, that is a valid rule you could write. I don't think they should do that. But, never underestimate, I suppose. But, I mean, the Beast of Chaos update was mostly them updating a piece of terrain, and I would say it had a pretty big effect, so who knows? I guess we'll find out. So, yeah, cool stuff. FEC. We knew there was no death books on the way basically for a while anyway, so this is not surprising at all.
Another item that we didn't have on the list, but while it's on my mind, I saw Las Vegas Open tickets are available. I'm not sure the status. I'm sure they're going quick, especially for the championships, but anybody's interested might check and see if there's any still available. But yeah, it's obviously one of the big events every year.
Somehow it's only June and already we're getting our event tickets for July. Doesn't time fly? Living in the future. No, it's great. I hope LVO is going to be a great time. It is the one big event of the main 3 that I do not go to, and but it always seems like it's fun. So cool. Good stuff. All right. Well, I guess that brings us to the end of the news. Fast and easy. There we go. Hey, as we transition to pick of the week. Why doesn't everybody hit like? So, yeah. The more likes you get, the better the FEC update will be. There you go. So,
picks of the week, correction.
Right, the pick of the week section of this, exactly. So, Tyler, start us off with all your infinite picks.
Excellent. Awesome Weird Knobs. They are an amazing gaming club in Austin, Texas. They just had their Smash and Bash over the weekend. Looked like an excellent event. Love the pack that they put together. They streamed their games, some of the games, on Twitch. So if folks are interested in checking out some of those, a chance to watch a little bit. Really good. That's on their new channel on Twitch. This cast is a new podcast hosted by Alex Q with Darren Watson and Owen Jackson. It's an absolute riot. They're talking about their experience at AOS Worlds. I think they're going to pick kind of a topic to focus on each episode. Talking about like players, psychological profiles, deployment strategies, a lot of cool things they've got planned. So listen to that episode. It was fantastic. And then the Dice cast. We might have one of the hosts here. Edeneth and Night Haunt was the second to last battle report that you guys did, Nick.
Yep.
It was excellent. I really liked the conversation that Justin, you had at the end of the game, in particular in terms of Night Hunt and what we might have to look forward to and get excited about in terms of some of the Night Hunt. A little bit of sarcasm there, not maybe just a little bit, in terms of the Night Hunt play style or some of the play styles. I think it is a pretty incredible book, but yeah, they're going to be, I think, we probably have a pretty noticeable impact on the meta. Better
For
worse.
sure. And it's a very diverse book. I think you can lean a bunch of different directions, even though a lot of the troops feel samey. You can lean in some very different, very compelling directions in that book, and I think it is going to shake up the meta.
Yeah, I agree. As we said on our show, I think it continues the strength to strength of most of the books in 3.0. Honestly. All right, Nick, what about yourself? What would you like to share out with everybody?
I've got 2 picks of the week. My first is Cubic Shenanigans. With they're local to us. We're in the Milwaukee area, and they're in the Milwaukee area as well. They just had a great podcast for the Nighthaunt Battletome review, and they both know Nighthaunt really well. Brendan, the Lord of Death, has played Nighthaunt for forever, and Dan has been a Nighthaunt player for at least a few years as well. So they did a great dive on it, and their upcoming episode, which should be out tomorrow, is on their experience with Vault Wars. So I'm looking forward to that.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah. And then my second pick is Meth's Rantathon, raising money for mental health awareness. It's his, I believe, 3rd or 4th year in a row doing this. He has a ton of guests on, great conversations around Warhammer, around mental health, and around other topics in the gaming community. And it's awesome to watch. He raises just a tremendous amount of money for the charities that he supports. And I would encourage everybody, when that is going on, to check that out. It's July 30th and 31st this year. We donated last year, and we're donating again this year on behalf of the channel. We're putting out a full Gits army if somebody wants to get into Gits.
Wow, okay.
Gits really the poster child of mental health. And so we're leaning into the theme there. And like I said, it's a great cause, and everybody should check it out.
Yeah, get excited. It's going to be a fun time as always. Year 1, we got Muppets Evolved, the role-playing game. So just on an offhand joke from the Rerolling Ones crew. So lots of fun things there. Who knows what will come out of it in years to come. All right, my pick of the week. If this battle tactics talk isn't enough tactic talk for you, then you should check out our good buddy Rob, the Honest Wargamer, who had his AOS Monday show also discussing that, and that is linked down below. All of those are linked down below because everybody was responsible and sent me their links in advance, so thank you both. And so everything's linked down there. Check it out in the description. All right, gentlemen. With that, let's turn to a little hobby time.
No, I didn't do any hobby. Leave me alone. Move on, Nick. You're up.
Stop.
Stop. A little busy by helping out somebody, a good friend.
You were doing a lot of work. That's not where I want to start.
All my time.
That's
okay.
not. I understand you didn't pay anything. That's fine, Tom. I'm not going to beat you up over it. Here's my question. My question's not that. We're not in the you're painting stuff yet. The question we got to answer that the world wants to know, Tyler, is how many units are you currently committed to?
11. That's still the number.
11 is the number. Well, are we counting Polcastro's offer?
We're not counting Okay, if that's a real offer. So Anthony Polcastro offered to print 5 tables if I paint 2 minimum size units. I don't even know what that number is. It's probably something like 50, probably, of the worst war scroll in the entire game. They should not exist. You should go around. They should be rounded up and burned. I think that this is the one unit you could it's a good cause. Skinks.
Skinks, yes. This is the hill you want to die on. Skinks, yes.
This is the hill that I will die on. Cass with Season of War is right there with me. Any sensible human being is right there with me. Anyway, that's a pretty good offer, I guess. That's worth selling my soul.
It's 5 tables for 2 boxes of skinks. What are you going to do there? So, my point is that the terrain challenge is still on to help Tyler build up the terrain collective. So don't forget about that. So if people donate a table worth of terrain, then Tyler will have to paint things, and that's all fun. And we want Tyler to, at the end of this, have to paint at least 2 armies or 1 really big army. Tyler, I saw Mini Wargaming Dave shared out his how I got to 144,000 points of Chaos Space Marines video. So I feel like we can get you there. That same, like we can get you to that point. A couple of years from now, you'll be doing the same video. All right, but no problem. Nick, what have you been hobbying on? What's on your table, buddy?
I'm working on Legion of the First Prince. Right now, I've got some Nurgle stuff that I'm doing. Some Plague Bearers on the table.
Nice.
So, getting those table ready. Got a couple tournaments in July, and way too much of it is still gray. So I'm working on that.
Nurgle is fun to paint, I will say that. So, yeah, absolutely. My hobby time, since I can talk about it this week, although this is the same thing I was working on last week, has been a little bit more involved in a big project, and that is this. That is the Kratos super heavy battle tank or whatever it's called.
Oh, wow.
Something like that. Doesn't matter. It's a 40k tank thing, 30k tank thing. It's available in 40k now as well. And I'm trying to take this up to a competition quality and make a video out of it. So this might be the most involved video I've ever had to make, just because of so much detail. But yeah, this thing's awesome, and I love it. I love tanks. I love cool vehicles, and you know, so this is just a fun chance to paint it and do some fun stuff with the Imperial Guard color scheme. So yeah, there you go. Should be done with that hopefully in the next couple days. We're getting into the home stretch.
That looks awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I'm very excited about it. It's coming out nicely. So let's the video will just touch on a million things, like as far as competition vehicles go. So you know, painting yellow and detail weathering and everything. Just everything all at once. Everything everywhere all at once. All right. Well, you know what? I feel like if you're watching right now, for the quickest run through our first 3 segments in a long time.
18 minutes. What am I doing? This is terrible. All right. Nick,
Oh yeah, my friend. We're good. But this leaves us more time for discussion. Let's get on to the battle tactics. Hit like for zooming fast, but still covering all the relevant items. And let's get into the battle tactics. Good or bad? Okay, so here's the question. This is a new mechanic as of 3.0, right? So we've been playing with these now for about a year, and Tyler and I were talking before the show about getting a survey together about people's general feelings in the world after a year of 3.0 on the various elements of the game. And the question arose to me of this particular mechanic. Of are they good or are they bad? And the challenge that I keep running into is, Tyler, when you posted your question today, you said, hey, we're going to talk about battle tactics. Give me some ideas for, you know, what you think would be cool battle tactics, which like one person followed the assignment. Everybody else too, was like, battle tactics are horrible. They should be thrown into the sea and forgotten, buried into the ash bin of history. Forget it. Okay, they're terrible. And then, no, it wasn't Korn C1 Red Gun. It was FEC. It just, there was a Korn guy on the cover for 40k World Eaters. So that's one side. And then you had other people who were answering that were like, battle tactics are the greatest thing ever. They changed my life. Face of God, and I was forever changed. Like Saul on the road to Damascus, so too did I now know the truth, the light, and the way. So
or less, yeah.
There's a bit of a spectrum, I think, is what I'm trying to say, in how people feel about them. So we're going to try to cut through the noise and get to something, and get to like what is actually true about them. Aaron Thomas, I haven't played AOS such a long time. What are battle tactics? Is there a 40k analog? Well, Aaron, I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about those. Fortunately, I included an overview slide. So they were introduced in 3.0 with the goal of adding a second tactical challenge and orthogonal goal to your objective capturing. Effectively, they are a thing that you decide at the start of your turn, each round, start of your hero phase. Amongst doing other start of the hero phase things, you have to choose a battle tactic, and that's going to be something you are trying to accomplish that round. We will show some examples of these later as we talk through some of them that are there and used in the current battle packs. But effectively, they're like a quest. That's how Rob said it, and I like that idea. Yeah. That's kind of the concept, right? It's this little quest you're going to go on. Conquer this objective, kill that hero, destroy that unit. Something like that.
Right
cool.
there, you just gave a vastly better explanation of both. You touch on the what as well, but the why. I mean, it's an old chestnut, right? Start with why. So I look back at the core book and the General's Handbook, and there was almost no why given for why we're doing these things in the first place.
Sure.
There's like a very small amount early on in the General's Handbook Battle Pack section before you get into the breakdown of the battle tactics. I think that's been part of the problem for a number of folks is the lack of some grounding, some context to connect, with their sense of what they're supposed to be doing in a game, why they're playing the game, their sense of realism, the story, the perception that shapes what their army is supposed to be doing, yada yada yada. So anyway, I love what you just said there.
Well, good. I'm glad.
And to Aaron's last question, the 40K analog here would be secondary objectives.
Yeah. Yep. So these are not part of the core rules per se. By that, what I mean is 1.0 through 28.x. I think it's 28.2. I wrote 0.0, but that should say 28.2. Like, that is the numbered sections of the core rules. There's no reference to battle tactics in there, okay? However, it is part of the core battle pack that is on offer in the core rules. And as a matter of fact, if you just look at the core rules like in your app, the first thing you're going to see is battle tactics, and it will take you to that list of 6 that are in there. The basic battle pack that's in the core rules introduced 6 battle tactics. The GHB 21 battle pack introduces 8 battle tactics. These are mutually exclusive. Battle tactics themselves are theoretically, we'll talk about that more in a moment, of the battle pack you're playing under. So, for example, Season of War Thondia introduced a new battle pack. We've talked about the battle pack technology and why it's so powerful, because when you use a battle pack, you can change any expectations from the core rules, right? And one of the things that the Season of War Thondia did for that sort of narrative arc of 5 games you play is it said, hey, there's new battle tactics. And they focus more on doing stuff with like the incarnates and playing with the various things that are happening there. In fact, some of the scenarios in Season of War Thondia introduce mission-specific battle tactics relevant to that particular mission you're trying to achieve, right? But it's all derivative of that particular battle pack. So, which is, I have no problem with, and conceptually makes perfect sense. Here's the structure you're playing under, the battle pack. Could be the standard matched play one we use in the GHB, could be a core one, could be others, like we mentioned the narrative ones, like Season of War. And from that derives the things you're trying to accomplish in the game. Okay? These have also been found in all new battle tomes and in the White Dwarf Tome Celestials. That is probably another place where they can happen.
Least controversial portion of this.
Certainly. No issues there whatsoever. We're not going to completely gut and disassemble that in just a few moments. But yeah, the basic idea here is those are army-specific battle tactics is what's being introduced. So they theoretically then fasten on to any battle pack you're playing, because there's no other rules that would guide them. So now, like, if you were using the very core battle pack, you would have 6 plus whatever's in your army. If you're using the GHB, you have 8 plus whatever's in your army, and so on. Okay? Okay. So, that's the basic idea here. Anything I missed, gentlemen, in the overview?
Oh, let's see. Yeah, seems pretty solid. Nick, any thoughts?
They are part of the core victory condition of the game, right? Because they do give you victory points, so it's important to understand that they aren't an optional thing to do. They're not giving you an extra benefit. They are fundamentally part of what you're trying to accomplish.
That's an excellent point that I didn't make. Yes, these are a major part of the scoring mechanic. Yes, absolutely. Yep. Okay. Cool. Tyler, anything else we want to hit here?
Yeah, like I just got critiques in my head about them, but maybe I can hold off.
Oh, we'll come to those. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but no, yeah, that is a good point.
And we're going to touch on, like I said, this is good or bad. We're going to touch on the whole panoply of the experience here. Okay. Yes. Sorry about the dog barking. One of my dogs is very mouthy and decided that apparently something was a problem. All right. We're just going to take a look here at existing battle tactics. These are the best versions of these I could find. So here we go. I wasn't going to retype all of them. We have, as I mentioned, some in the core rules and some in the GHB 2021. I didn't grab the Season of Warthandia, but as mentioned, those also exist there. These are all the battle pack derivative ones. I think most of us have forgotten that the core rules ones exist. The first couple games I played were actually under the core rules battle pack. I didn't hate it at all. I actually kind of like some of these that aren't present in the GHB 21. For example, like Secure the Center is a really interesting one, I think. The control 6 inches of the center of the battlefield, effectively sort of making a quasi new objective in the dead center of the battlefield, and then you have to suddenly control that. Which often, by the way, is not where objectives are in many missions. There's no objective there in many missions. So that's kind of an interesting thing, drawing you away from the objectives. There's some similar-ish stuff, and so on and so forth. There's less in the core rules, only 6 compared to 8. Obviously, the GHB also introduced a bunch of other season-specific stuff, which is useful to talk about. You mentioned they're worth points. The sort of base conception of these in most, the way that most battle plans are scored is that they're worth 2 points every time you complete a battle tactic. And when you assume that sort of 3 is what you're getting from the objectives, that sort of makes, in simplest form, that makes for 5 rounds. They're 40% of your potential maximum score each turn, right? Theoretically. Now, of course, with the GHB 2021, what we saw was, because it's a monster-focused year, we saw all this addition of, like, if you do X thing with a monster, you get 1 bonus point, and so on and so forth. Okay. As well as, obviously, this larger battle pack of the GHB introducing the kill a monster, get a victory point thing, which is not a battle tactic, but it's just, to also balance that out. Okay. Here's what I want to do on this one. Nick, from either of these two, I don't care. What are the ones you like and why? Like,
Sure.
Why do you enjoy them?
My favorite is Savage Spearhead, and that goes into something we'll touch on probably later in the conversation, but I like that Savage Spearhead often involves an opportunity cost in the way that the others do not. You are often doing something that you wouldn't otherwise do in order to accomplish Savage Spearhead, and many of the others are incentivizing you to do something that you want to do anyway to further your game plan, so I like Savage Spearhead.
Yep. Okay. Tyler, you got a hot pick?
Oh, yeah, I really like that answer. Yeah, let's see. There's definitely not enough of them along the lines of what Nick just described. In terms of, I think aggressive expansion isn't too bad. I like the idea behind aggressive expansion. The name often isn't appropriate, right, for how you actually do it. Because sometimes, Savage Gains, you're picking the one that's on the border of your territory, and then you're picking one in the middle, right? So you're not, semi-aggressively expanding, I suppose. So, yeah.
My favorite is when it's like Feral Foray and you don't even have to move at all to complete that one. That's always fun.
Well, doesn't it? It has to be. I think Feral Foray, you cannot do it because Feral Foray is split down the middle, I believe.
Oh, maybe this territory is in the middle of that one, but there's some of them where they rest on your line, being the point.
Yeah,
yes.
definitely.
Yeah, you might be right on the territory split on that, but yes.
I do like the idea behind aggressive expansion. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's 2 objectives. Yeah.
Sure. I already mentioned mine. I really like Secure the Center. Again, because it's for much the same reason you mentioned Savage Spirit. It's causing you to move to a place in the board you might not be otherwise motivated to move to, right? Which I find interesting. I like when they're sort of pulling your army apart or asking you to move in unusual ways or to places where there's sort of other natural. Like you naturally gravitate towards objectives, right? Like that's where armies tend to move and have fights, is over objectives. Of course, that's not too surprising or weird, right? Okay. Which one do you like the least? Nick, what of these do you like the least? Again, you can pick from any.
It's a little bit of a hot take, but I dislike Conquer, I think, the most.
Okay. Why so?
Because the core mechanic of the game, the core victory condition of the game, is taking objectives. and in doing that to get an extra cookie in the form of a battle tactic, it doesn't change your game plan in any way. You're going to do what you're going to do. It doesn't create any incentive to play any differently. It creates an extra punishment if you fail at your primary objective. And so I don't like it as what these should be, in my opinion, which is an alternate goal or a quest, as you mentioned it.
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't accomplish that.
Okay, cool. All right, good stuff. Yeah, so like the point being is it's a bit of a hat on a hat, right? It's incentivizing you theoretically to do something you were already wanting to do, which just takes some objectives, right? Okay, cool. Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, it's an obvious one, but Ferocious Advance.
Sure.
Of course, the majority of games that I played in 3.0, not only am I often picking that one, my opponent is picking that one too, right? So we just have a hold hands and run, a good old time, both of us, that first round. And then we move on. So now, as we get into this, I think there's something to be said about having a battle tactic that is viable across the majority of factions. It's just a question of to what degree is it viable. And this one is far too easy, of course, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a fan.
Specifically viable in turn 1, right?
Turn 1 specifically, yeah.
Sure. For me, it's going to be Monstrous Takeover. I hate Monstrous Takeover so much. I hate that it's just you sit some monster's fat butt on an objective that you already control, like buried in your territory under no risk. They're not taking over anything. It should be called Monstrous Sit in a Place, right? Like it's just if you've got a monster, it's so autocomplete, right? And I think that gets to a couple of the different challenges that we'll eventually identify here. We're kind of hinting around the edge of them, but I thought it would be interesting to start with what we like and what we don't like, and then we can kind of let's dig deeper into that, right, and figure out what's the root cause on that stuff, right?
Right. Well, again, Vince, a lot of this, I feel, I mean, maybe it's just me. I'm curious, you guys, if you have any pushback on this idea, but I've really felt the lack of context for why we're doing these things in the first place.
Sure.
That has had a big impact on people's perceptions, the stories that are going on in their heads. What I said earlier, right? If we had more context, grounding, understanding of why these things exist, what they're supposed to be doing, it often seems like the company, the studio is still hesitant to give some semblance of intent, sort of design intent or design understanding behind some of the decisions. That if you had a little bit more of that, you could understand the contours of these things, what they're supposed to look like. Are we supposed to be dealing with, so their secondary objectives, does that necessarily mean that most of them should be orthogonal to the core nature of what we're doing on a battlefield?
There's two levels to this. You're talking about the meta explanation of why we're doing this, right? You could also just get down into the level of the game and say the why we're doing this. Like, why do I care? Why is it making me win this fight that 3 idiots held hands and ran forward together?
Right.
And may not have even moved.
Right. Like, why am I now closer to victory? Right?
Yes.
What has actually occurred here? Or if I'm not closer to victory, maybe that's not the thing. Why am I closer to achieving whatever goals I had as an army?
I've heard this from so many players over this first year with 3.0, that these things take away from their realism, the story, the perception that they have of how this game is supposed to be played, what their army is supposed to be doing on the battlefield, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, it doesn't happen to me personally, but it seems to be a thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I feel like there's 2 levels of lacking explanation here, right? We were given this very gamey tool, okay? And then, and there's a lot of good and bad to it, but it's hard to seed it mentally. Now, some people have more problem with that than others, right? For some people, it's not an issue, right? For some folks, the game is the game, rules are rules. It's just a construct, right? I'm not really trying to. You're not ruining my immersion, man, because there's no immersion to it, right? For other people, this is more of a prickly issue. So that's certainly like has got its own things going on. And CW, I just want to make sure I'm not talking about realism, right? I'm talking about verisimilitude. Those are two very different things, right? And verisimilitude often matters a lot. Realism doesn't. Like you can have like chain swords in 40K are the ultimate example of this. Like that's the stupidest thing in the universe. Okay, like it makes no sense whatsoever. I take it back. There's an even dumber thing. A guy with a chainsword on a motorcycle. Okay, like that is an insane thing that you would use in a battle where people have like laser guns and cannons and stuff, right? Like that makes no sense. But it doesn't matter. It's not realistic. But the verisimilitude of the world, it makes perfect sense. Because the weird rituals and the nature of the world and the grim darkness of it and the themes and all of that, right? So your brain doesn't get stuck on it, right? That's what I'm speaking toward. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the good. Okay. I'm just time stamping us here. All right. Let's talk about good stuff. This is what I consider the good stuff. I'm open to if I missed anything. Okay. Idea. The idea of the thing is good. I know that sounds silly, but I really mean it. The concept of the thing, of a second dynamic layer of interactivity and goals that each player can reach for, separately from the main thing they're trying to achieve, I feel like is really good. That's a good concept, right? Because, again, we're not talking, don't worry about the implementation. Let's clear our heads for a moment of whatever battle tactics you've seen. If I was just proposing the concept, I think most people would be positive on it. Because it's like, hey, even if you're losing, there's still stuff you can do, right? You can still get in there and get some points. You can be achieving something that's toward victory or towards your army's goals or however you want to frame that, right? So,
it creates one step toward an alternate win condition. Right, it's not a full alternate win condition, but instead of your army tabling your opponent and controlling the center objectives, you can, in theory, if this system was orchestrated such, you could build an army that just focused on curing these, denying these, and try to get a victory that way, right? In an ideal world.
Yep. Okay. Tyler, conceptually?
Yeah, on that first layer, so I was talking with both of you this week about this layer and how this is probably a show unto itself in my mind, where we could have an entire show exploring different potential win condition systems for AOS, right?
Sure.
I was talking with both of you about Warhammer Fantasy Battle. I did the usual 20-year gap between playing, but I hear all the time about, mostly as I understand it, the win condition there was killing your opponents, and whoever did that better wins the game.
Basically, I mean, again, there were ITC and Swedish comp and things like that would lay over that in interesting ways and create various other stuff. But yeah, for the most part, it was just kill your opponent better than they killed you.
Right. So that's one version of a win condition, a context in which you could play a game like this. Another is 1.0 and 2.0 that we had, where broadly we're orienting around playing to control the tokens, get the gold, as Rob and gang Nate always say. And the 3.0, of course, has added this other layer. I mean, we had various versions of 2.0 where, like, NashCon, we added schemes, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that was the basic of it. So anyway, I think that would be an interesting show, maybe at some point, Vince, to kind of look at AOS through that lens.
No, you're absolutely right. Because, like, one of the things Sean just mentioned in the chat is that, like, right now they feel like they're still contributing in the same way no matter what's going on because they're just more victory points in the pile, right? And if you look at how schemes were implemented at NashCon when we built those and David ran them, the way David implemented them in scoring was they didn't contribute. Like, the scheme did not contribute to your win of the game. Right? They were two completely separate columns. You could win the game, that achieves some amount of points, and you could complete your scheme, which is different because a scheme was one thing you were trying to do over the course of the whole game, and it was more like a grand strategy, yeah. Which I purposely left out of this discussion because there's only so much we can do here. But like grand strats are a totally different thing. We might do a show of like why grand strat should just be schemes. But at any rate, the they were also hidden information. Like your opponent wasn't aware of them, right? And so they were trying to guess like what you're trying to accomplish. But they were worth big points if you accomplish them, not toward winning the game, towards your score in the tournament, right? So they were almost by necessity a competitive play punch out, right? Because they were used to create differentiation in scoring and stuff like that, right? Whereas this is, yes, just adding on to the layer, but that wouldn't be necessary, which is what you're talking about, right? We could imagine that battle tactics didn't add any victory points whatsoever, okay? That just wasn't a thing they did. Imagine we got a new battle pack that said something like this. As part, like we got a battle pack as part of an organized play tournament. Okay, that's where this would come in. An organized play tournament pack. And it said, okay, this game scores per the game scores, objectives, and whatever else is going on. You don't get any points for battle tactics. Instead, what happens is, at the end of the game, if you complete more battle tactics than your opponent, you get 5 extra points on your final score, whatever that tallies to for the game, right? So, like, if you get 15 points for winning a major victory, you get to 20 if you win also the battle tactics thing, right? But they're completely moving independently. Like, the person who lost could complete more battle tactics, they get 5 points, the other person gets 15. That could also be the way it shakes out, right? That would be doable, right? But that's not how it's currently constructed. But the framework is there, and that's what I'm saying. The framework of the idea to me is really good, right? I think the idea behind it, or also creating additional skill tests, is good, right? Like creating additional skill tests in the game to help separate players and create that more skill testing environment. Can you complete this thing? Again, this might be more theory than in practice, but nonetheless, it's there, right? That's the idea of the thing. It does. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Some interesting list building decisions come out of this, or could come out of this. Right now, it's just, do you include a monster so you can take monsters takeover? But if battle tactics were constructed differently, you could have incentives for different list building considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that a big way, because some of these like army specific ones are very, very involved in that. But even obviously the general GHB ones, how many times did you think, well, I should probably have at least one monster in my list? Right. I mean, that right there is list influence, is like list building being influenced by battle tactics, right? I think from a tournament play perspective, it is pretty important because it can do things like be used to separate scores. It can be used to create, more differentiation amongst the individual players who are all 2-3 or 3-2, or I shouldn't say because that's the end of the game, but either way, you get what I'm saying at the end of the tourney. You get what I'm saying, right? Throughout the course of the tournament, it can be used to not only create separations of scores round to round, but also game to game, so on and so forth.
Nick, did you like the Vault? Yeah, you're welcome to say you hated it. Did you like the Vault Wars scoring system, of course, with how we did it, where we did have additional points that you would get for your battle tactics that you completed and your grand strategy that you completed to add to your tournament point score?
I did overall, and I liked that you didn't include the faction-specific ones. Those were just kind of straight off, no faction-specific grand strats or battle tactics. But then, yes, just having... in addition to your win or loss, the differentiator then between you and I maybe both had a win, but I got more battle tactics, so I completed more of what I needed to do during the game. I would like that incentive structure, I think, better if the battle tactics were not so tied to tabling your opponent and controlling all the objectives. But in general, I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, where the rubber meets the road here is where we're going to get into some issues for sure. And you're absolutely right, Gareth. You're not wrong, brother. When we had you on the show, I praised your scoring system for using this stuff. I think it's well suited for that competitive play. I think you guys built a good pack, but you built a good conceptual pack that could obviously be expanded.
Yeah.
And I know there's other differentiation out there. Okay. The last point I'll say is it does theoretically allow for counterplay, right? In stopping your opponent from achieving their battle tactics. Like, it creates a secondary sort of quote-unquote mini-game that's happening that's not intrusive on the normal game. It's still using the normal mechanics of the game. And here I grabbed it, Slay the Warlord, because this is a pretty obvious one, right? Like, in my opponent's turn, if they call Slay the Warlord, I'm like, okay, heroic action, finest hour on my Warlord,
Sure.
right? Like, on my general, like, instantly, you know? Like, that is just might as well be the windmill slam response. Anytime someone calls Slay the Warlord, you finest hour that general, right? So it's like that's a very simple example of counterplay, but it's there, right? And I think we'll when we, again, where the rubber meets the road and where we get into the challenges, that counterplay isn't always found, right? And that can be a challenge. You know, so this is kind of what I see as some of the good stuff, and there's good stuff here. The people who praised these in your Twitter mentions there, Tyler, they were big fans of them, right? And for reasons that are listed here, and probably more, right? Like, they enjoy the skill test, the choice. They enjoy having something else to achieve, right? All that kind of stuff. Like, there's a lot of good things that are theoretically being derived from this experience, right?
Yeah, I was looking at a tweet here. I think it was from Lance Tan. It adds a layer of strategy to the game that rewards you for planning how to get points for all 5 rounds while also allowing you to deny your opponent beyond just killing things and holding objectives. And I think that's a great summation. Certainly have a lot of my thoughts and enjoyment. Generally have loved this system. It's been my favorite sort of game system 3.0. This piece of it, especially compared to 1.0 and 2.0, where we've had this additional layer get added on, this third layer. We're killing things, we're holding tokens, holding the gold, going after the gold, and we're achieving secondary objectives built into the game. Makes it a lot more dynamic, interesting, especially when you combine it with hold 1, hold 2, hold more. You know, it's like with Nick earlier. We've discussed this, Vince, right? We have 3 buckets in some ways with these mission scorings. We've got a knife to the heart style. Nick made this point earlier today with marking territory. Very different win condition, right? With how that one works. You hold all 4, or if you burn 1 and you hold all 3, you win the game outright. So that's 1 bucket. You've got the potential for major differential in scoring. Veins of Gur has 15 points available in round 5. Savage Gains can get carried away sometimes. And then you've got the hold 1, hold 2, hold more, right? So, and you know, how these things interact with those different buckets, those categories, I think is an interesting conversation as well, in terms of the, you know, the impact differential that they can have within these different types of missions. Yeah, really, really love the system.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason marking territory is the least played scenario in all of AOS, as near as we can tell from the tournament data. Certainly the least common one that ever shows up in tournaments. I can say that with complete assurity.
And interestingly, it's probably the one that battle tactics matter the most, because you're typically going to draw on the primary condition there, and often it's going to come down to who got more battle tactics completed.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about challenges. Because what the question we want to answer here is, how well does this concept hold up? Like, a lot of the good things I talked about, and I think they're good things, but we have to say, but now we have to take it down to the level of reality, right? Because they a lot of them were like, conceptually it does this, conceptually it does that. Yeah, and sometimes it does. I showed you a tactic that I think is interactive and skill testing, right? Like, when you call Slay the Warlord is a skill testing thing, if you ever call it, right? There's clear interactivity there. Now, I bet a lot of people just never call Slay the Warlord because it's one of the hardest ones to do, because it is interactive. They do have counterplay, right?
Or you do it to fish out a finest hour. You do it deliberately to try to fish it out.
Sure.
So that you're better set up to, in a future turn, kill what you need to kill.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed, there was a story that Nathan told in the Monday show about battle tactics, that it was his turn and they were coming down to it. And he realized that one of the opponent's only battle tactics they had left to utilize was broken ranks. Okay? Like, that was basically the only battle tactic they could still use. And he only had 1 battle line unit left in his army, his Ardboys. Everything else he had was non-battle line. So on his turn, he charged his Ardboys in and got them to within fighting distance of some big, really destructive monster hero. I do not remember who he was playing, so I apologize. But effectively someone who would definitely lift an army or a unit of Ardboys. Okay? Right. And force the guy to kill his unit off turn, right? Because it was a single hero monster. The guy had to fight. You can't fight with less than all your weapons, right? One Ardboy was in range it was within an inch, so there was not like, you know, he couldn't not pile in. He couldn't not swing with all his weapons. He could hope the dice were bad. That was basically it. And he lifted the unit of Ardboys in his own turn, allowing him for no battle tactic then on his turn, right? Because now he effectively suicided his unit to then prevent to counterplay off broken ranks. I love that. Right? That's interactivity. Like, what a great skill test that was. Okay? But are these the set we have skill testing to, you know, with the 8 we've got? Like, I have Ferocious Advance here because, I mean, we talked about it already. Right? It's just silly. I think when it comes down to it, and look, this isn't too surprising. Are these a skill test? Ferocious Advance? Obviously not. Get out of here. Okay, do they allow counterplay? I have Monstrous Takeover as an example, but many of these don't allow counterplay. Right? I could have just listed Ferocious Advance again. Right? Like, almost anybody's going to find 3 units to run if that's what they need to do. Okay, or whatever.
I mean, even like Nick, your point about Conquer, even Conquer a lot of the time in my experience. Not, I mean, yeah, sometimes someone might get a cheeky redeploy or something. Right. May not sufficiently wipe out a unit you should have wiped out to have more models on that objective, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, more often than not, you're able to control the variables and get Conquer when you need to get it. So it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these aren't skill testing and aren't allowing counterplay, and I think that's the challenge. Now, that's not to say the whole list is bad. It's not. I'm saying that we've got problems in the list. And we're going to compound the challenge that creates with the next question, which is, Sean said Bellicor doesn't give you counterplay with Ferocious Advance. Fair point. Bellicor is an answer to a lot of things. Do they create a separation of scores? Here is my ultimate argument. This is ultimately what it comes down to, because this seems to be their main concept with it, right? On top of everything else, like, erase all the rest of the meta layers. They seem to want this to be a main scoring mechanic that is having you doing something else besides fighting on objectives, right? What else could the base root purpose of this be? Right? And if the closer we come to both armies at the table being able to complete 5 tactics without interactivity, the more pointless these become. Right? And by the way, I would bet the average, like, I would bet that if I looked at most tournament data and cut to the top half of the tournament, most people are going 4 for 5 or 5 for 5 if they're doing their whole blah 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 whatever, right? I mean, who aren't dead, like, right? Like, unless you get tabled and just you can't complete any more tactics, right? That's the only thing really stopping you from doing it. The average should be in a 5-round game, like, of games that go to 5 rounds, the average we should be aiming for should be you're completing 3 out of 5. Like, if I just averaged everything out, right? And I mean like non-tabling situations, because then you'd have a real differentiator on your hand, right? Because then getting to 4 or 5 would become the stretch, whereas falling to 2 or 1 would be the oddity out. Gareth says he's run that data, and I'm correct. I trust the Economist, right? And so the issue I have here is if literally both players, right, can just sit there and just do their 5, yeah, without interactivity or risk, then these are pointless. It's just literally pointless bookkeeping. These are adding nothing, right? I'm not saying that's the world we're necessarily in, but I'm saying that there's some armies that can absolutely do that right now. They can just go 5 for 5, no interactivity, no action. Like, as long as they aren't tabled, they will complete all 5 tactics, regardless of who they're against or what their opponent does or activates or casts. They can just do it.
And that eliminates all of the interesting list building options to make sure that you're really good on battle tactics. It eliminates all of your counterplay options. It eliminates all of your strategy to get yourself in a position to complete them, because so many of them are gimmies. You're probably going to get there as long as you follow your game plan. So many of them are gimmies. You're probably not going to be able to stop your opponent unless you're one of the specific things.
Yeah, one of the like very unusual, weird things, like a Bellicor type of thing. Yeah.
Right. Unless you have one of those specific tools to deal with this, you just kind of accept that your opponent is going to get them. Occasionally, you'll have a great moment where you can play into the strategy and deny one, and it feels great to deny a battle tactic, right?
Yeah, sure.
Redeploy or even just getting the lucky on rolls, it feels great to turn that off. But in general, you expect your opponent to get them. You expect to get them. All of the other creativity goes away.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Already our anchoring on these has been reset incorrectly, right? We just expect to get them. You're shocked when a battle tactic's dropped, right? It's the unusual situation, which the closer that is to true, again, the more pointless these become. Like, we're reaching the asymptote of pointlessness, right? And, so Tiding said that this is like the kind of reasons and things we just talked about is that they could use this to balance armies. I don't disagree with that, Tidings. We talked about that before, how you could make an army that's kind of like worse at the game, meaning like they don't really have traditional like hammers or anvils. They're not good fighters or whatever, but they have neat strength in the battle tactics space, right? So it's harder for them to like take or hold objectives, but they're really, really good at battle tactics. That would be cool space to explore. But that only works if everybody's not just going 5 for 5, right? Mm-hmm. If everybody's 5 for fighting, then it's irrelevant. Right?
And this is the space that Legion lives in right now, is that they're not better than anybody else at getting battle tactics, but they're better than everybody else at denying 1 or 2 a game if you've got Kairos and Bellicor. And that's often their margin of victory. This is the world they live in, and it's a great spot that at least one army gets to play in that way.
Right. Yeah. And I really do not like there's another challenge that we haven't hit on here, but they're it's in both of these things. I really hate these weird specific unit type bonus points.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, if the game, first of all, we're just going to take Prime Hunt, the Primal Hunter whole thing, and jettison that directly into the sun. Okay, because that is obviously bad, and we did a whole show on it. And that just skews points all over the wackadoo place. I'm happy that it stopped some skew lists. It helped no one who was already weak. So come back to me. Like, I'm super glad that the rich people, instead of driving their Rolls Royce, got the Lambo out. Like, cool beans, I guess. I don't know what that matters to me as a poor person. Okay? I'm still over here in a beat-up 85 Chevy trying to hope that, like, I can, get this thing out one more time. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's, we may have some difference of opinion, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it has had a meaningful impact, but we can debate around.
It's had a meaningful impact on stopping dragons from being a force in the game, which I guess if that was your benchmark, we did it. Unfurl the banner, mission accomplished. All right,
it's a little more than that, but yeah.
You're right. It might be a little more. I will use your words exactly and agree with you. But regardless of all that, the bonus points on these are just way too heavily skewing, especially when they show up this much. Like, I know this was our first shot at this in GHB 21, but I really hope when we switch to Horde meta in GHB 22, I don't see 5 of these that are similar, where it's like double reinforced units or something like that, right? And I'm going to be like, oh, good Lord, That's still probably better than just monster, but here's the sniff test, right? Imagine if it replaced every instance of the word monster with totem. How happy would you be about these battle tactics? How skewing would they be, right? and that's the point. They could pick on any keyword they wanted, and it was so strongly skewing, and the bonus points just skew the score in such a big way, right? Because they just easily allow people to start creeping in ways that doesn't necessarily speak to the quality of what they accomplished. Is there a drop date for GHB 2022 yet, Chris? No, although we should be about a month away, assumingly. Like, Normally it's the last week of June, first weekish of July, second week of July. Like it's in that sort of 3-week period. So, assumingly we're about a month away, but who knows? Okay. So, anyways, I don't like the bonus points. Nick, Tyler.
I don't either. I think they are too big. It's 20% of your score in a typical turn if you go hold more and you get your battle tactic, then it's 20% more points. That's a lot of points. And it forces it rewards a certain type of unit which limits your creativity in list building.
Yep.
Right? You're disincentivized to run a list that has none.
I wouldn't mind it if there was one. Right?
Sure. Right.
Maybe two if it was soft. Right? Or very hard to achieve.
Right.
Right? That had like a lot of interplay. Okay. Like I wouldn't mind the second one being like on Slay the Warlord. You know, one of the toughest ones to achieve. But if there's like one that's like, oh, do this thing with a monster, you get a bonus. I'd be like, okay, cool. There's one battle tactic that's not incredibly warping. It's 1 point over the course of the game. The problem is when I can run multiple turns, just going bonus point, bonus point, bonus point, bonus point. Cool.
Or if the bonus point was for doing it with a type of unit that's inherently bad at doing that thing.
Sure.
Right. You kill a monster with a foot hero.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, we'll talk about some of those. Okay. All right. Anything else? So this is sort of the base challenges, right? I don't think our current list is really doing as much skill testing as we would want. There's some, but not as much as we should want. I don't think they're really allowing as much counterplay as we would want. And I don't think they create a separation of scores, or at least we're definitely on the road to them not creating a separation of scores, right? Like that's the end of the, like I can see that showing up on the mile marker, right? Like it's, 20 miles ahead, no more separation of scores. I know that's what's coming up. Okay. And I agree with you, CW. That's like, yeah, for talking about armies that just don't even have monsters. I mean, it's wackadoo when that much incentive happens on it, where armies just don't even have this unit type present. Like, okay.
I mean, just to say, one thing that we haven't explicitly mentioned yet is that we've talked about this before, Vince, but where a number of these battle tactics are kill oriented, right? And of course, all else equal, you often have to do less work by killing from range than you do in melee.
Mm-hmm.
Melee, you have to complete a charge. Potentially, you gotta deal with a potential redeploy. You just more variables could interrupt your capacity to achieve a battle tactic. Whereas there's 2.0 was dominated, summer 2020, and on up to July 2021. 2.0 was generally dominated by range damage. In the meta, that's mostly what we had for a long time.
The more kill-based battle tactics. I mean, I want to measure twice, cut once. The more kill-based battle tactics there are, the naturally more powerful shooting is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some other variables that are going on. Like Nick, you brought up terrain rolls. That contributes to it as well, I think, in the nature of what we've seen over this first season. But yeah, generally that seems to be clearly what we've seen from this first season.
Yep.
I'll add one more to this list, and that's that they don't change your game plan in a fundamental way.
Okay.
The opportunity cost for all of them, almost
for many of them. Sure, we can say many of them. Yeah.
Is no, right? I'm going to be trying to kill my opponent's models. I'm going to be trying to take objectives. 6 of the 8 reward me for killing models and taking objectives.
Yep. Very, very good point. I like that a lot. All right. Let's talk about Battle Tome battle tactics. That's right, folks. You knew it was coming. Here we are. The time has come. By the way, Battle Tome and we'll handle Tome Celestial in a minute, okay? All right. This is where it all falls apart. This is where we go fully off the rails in my mind. Okay? And I say this all the time on the show, and I want to try to unpack this. Because I think this is really important, and I don't think the people who are designing this game understand what they're doing with this. I don't want to be mean. They're all great people, and they're making a great game. This has been, 3.0's books have been the best books in the history of AOS. But this is bad. It's really bad. Okay? Because they're actively destroying a system with a lot of potential by including this crap. All right. So, here is Murderous Ploys out of Daughters of Cain. Okay? I have separated them into two categories. They were nice enough to separate them for me, effectively. Into amazing and crap. All right? And so, to just read these real quick for everybody. Here's the left side ones. Clash of Arms. You complete this tactic if 3 or more friendly units make a charge move this turn. If 2 or more of those units are Witch Elves or Sisters of Slaughter, you get an additional victory point. Okay?
That's amazing / crap. The first sentence is fine. Second sentence is crap.
I'm just saying, no, I mean amazing, like, for winning the game, right? Like,
it's
actually bad.
Okay.
These are bad for the game. I'm saying they're amazing for what you're trying to do, as far as, like, if you just took this solely at face value, right? If you weren't digging in, that's incredible, right? I mean,
idea of an additional victory point. Okay. I thought
yes, for charging with your chaff units or whatever. No.
Yeah,
I'm saying at the prima facie level, they're just amazing and easy to complete, right? Sure. That's why I didn't use good or bad, right? Because that's what I'm saying here. Cruel Delight. You complete this tactic if 2 or more friendly Canary units move using their fire and fight ability or fight and flight ability this turn. Which obviously you're just going to use the ones that do this automatically, the 2 Heartrender units, because there's no chance for them to fail. So, okay, cool. So basically, just activate 2 units of Canary and shoot with them. Got it. Okay, cool beans. And then, which by the way, has almost no counterplay whatsoever, since you can drop them from the sky and activate this. You can't even redeploy away from it. Yeah. Okay, Tide of Blades. You complete this tactic if there are 2 or more units from your starting army wholly within your opponent's territory at the end of this turn. So, the same thing that already exists base, but now with a kicker bonus point if it happens to be Witch Elves. So now you get, like, Savage Spearhead again, but also with bonus points. So just do that twice, right?
Yep.
Okay. These are quote unquote, when I say amazing, I just mean, like, if you're just trying to get to 5, these are amazing to do so. Because Daughters can just do 5. Like, none of those basically have any counterplay. All right? Like, I'm just going to do them. I mean, maybe you redeploy away from me with 1 unit. Okay? But all I need to do here is get a charge. Remember, I'm +1 to charge in turn 2, so I can't even fail 3-inch charges in this army. Right?
First one, Sisters of Slaughter, can just hang out outside of 3. They don't have to necessarily charge.
Well, they have to charge. Because you have to actually
you're right.
make
you
a charge.
3 more charges. Okay,
so it means you can't use your fancy Sisters of Slaughter 6-inch pilot crap. But still, right? Whereas the other 3, Executioner's Cult, do a nearly impossible thing. Hatred of Chaos, useful only if you're in a specific subfaction and you happen to be fighting Chaos. Like, okay. And then Unexpected Attack. You complete this tactic if a friendly Shadow Stalker's unit uses its Shadow Leap ability and then makes an 8-inch charge. Fantastic. Great. I say 8-inch because they should set up 9 inches away. And again, I'm assuming the +1 to charge. And shut up with Cogs, Tyler. It's not real.
Get out of my head, Vince.
Yep, I knew where you were going. So, like, it's so incredible that these two that potentially a single human being wrote both of these, that all 6 of these, right? Because what this says to me is you had 3 ideas and then you ran out and were just like, I don't know, let's get crazy, because there's no way you would ever pick the other 3. But yet those 3 on the left you're using every single time, and you're using it to race to 5. Like, if you're playing a Daughters army and you don't get tabled and you don't go 5 for 5 on battle tactics, I don't know what you were doing. I don't know what you were doing. Because you easily have 5 now that you can complete without any kind of interactivity or risk. That are going to fit, to your point, Nick, that fit completely within your existing battle tactics and strategy, right? Like, what you were going to do anyways to win the game. Well, I was going to charge you and try to murder you with all of these stabby ladies. So why not do that and get 3 points? Right?
Well,
I would just like to... Oh, real quick. I had one other quick point I wanted to make on this. Which is your comment about, having interesting list building decisions to make. My list my daughter's list, which is just a list I built of the things I like, okay, and what I have painted, I in no way, like, I obviously wrote that long before I ever read these, okay, and really paid attention to these. And you know what? I could do all 3 of these in a heartbeat, no problem, with my snake list. Every time. And I get the bonus points on most of these. Great.
The only thing this might change in your list is that you maybe run heart renders where you didn't before to guarantee that battle tactic, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the new book, you're using heart renders all the time anyways, because they're, like, so much better than life takers. But sure. So yeah, I mean, little to no interactivity. 3 are completely worthless. Easily push the army to 5 to complete without a challenge, right? But there's a second problem here that I really want to hone in on the counterplay thing. And then I'm going to shut up. I know I've been on a rant here. When all we're dealing with is the GHB 21, the part of the idea of counterplay is I need to understand what you're doing and what my army can do against it, right? When somebody calls Slay the Warlord, I know there's a set of things I can do against that, right? Like, I can announce, which we talked about, I can do Finest Hour. Gareth mentioned earlier in the chat, like, if I'm Khorne, I might spend some points, some blood points, to just, like, move out of the way to make it harder for you to get to, and then redeploy away from you again later, right? Like, there's counterplay there. And I know that because I know the base 8. I've played with them plenty of times, right? And 8 things is a reasonable number of things to know. Okay? The second we put these Battle Tome and Tome of Celestial items in there, we go from needing to know 8 to needing to know roughly 100. Impossible. Your thought about what counterplay you have against those starts the second they say, this is what I'm doing, and you go, what does that do? What do you need to do that? And you make them explain it to you.
And so even if these did have viable counterplay, you wouldn't be able to do it because you don't know it exists, right?
Right. You've never thought of it before this moment. Right. And so I just I cannot understate that problem, right? I would rather have, like, let's ask this question. Please, if you're watching this, here's what I want you to do. In the chat, tell me which one of these things you want. You can just put number 1 or number 2. Ready? Here we go. Number 1 is a small, tight list of 6 to 8 battle tactics that are shared amongst everybody, and that's it. That's the only list we get, and that's what we all have to play with. Okay? Or 2, a list of around 100. Sorry, that small list being well designed, functional, and meeting all the requirements. Or a list of 100 that you will probably in many armies just go 5 for 5 with, but have no counterplay, no skill test, whatever. So option 1 or option 2. Which one? Which one's better? Okay. And I say that almost jokingly. Like, of course it's number 1. Right? Because what we all want is a small, concise list that actually plays well, that we can know, that meets its purpose. Right? Like, it's not hard. This is easy stuff. Right?
I think Nick had an interesting perspective. I don't know if now's the time for it, but in terms of an alternative to what we've been getting, Nick, you want to take it away?
I think there is a little bit of room for a gray area in between these. You asked me in our conversation earlier, is there anyone who likes these or likes the idea of army-specific battle tactics? And I said, I actually do like the idea of army-specific battle tactics. Not this implementation of it at all. This is a terrible implementation of it, and either meaningless or trivializes the entire system. But I think there is a way that you could do this in a really compelling, interesting way that would further the goals of the game, provide a balancing lever, and be a great part of this. I think if every army had exactly one battle tactic that was heavily themed to that army, that fit in both the narrative of that army and the flow of the game in a way that provided opportunity cost, that was a reliable battle tactic, but something that you could explain to your opponent before the game and that they could then counterplay in the same way that we explain a handful of other things. Not a list of 6 that they need to keep in their head, but one that fits the army. Then I think there's a great opportunity for this. And by opportunity cost, I mean this has to be something that you are giving up in order to complete.
Sure.
An example that came to mind when we were brainstorming about this is if there was a battle tactic for Blades of Corn, for example, that said you complete this battle tactic if a friendly slaughter priest within 3 inches of the skull altar did not pray in the last turn or this turn.
Oh, sure. Yeah, where it's actually it's actually forcing you to be sort of like act in a way you might not want to. Yeah.
You're
Absolutely.
giving something up in order to complete this. And I think that's ideally the best way to get to that 60% completion. I don't want to complete 60% of my battle tactics because I failed rolls 40% of the time.
Yeah.
Right, where it's just this random swingy thing. I want to complete 60% of them because the cost of completing the other 40% was too high.
Yeah. It's good. That's a really good point. I could see that. I that as a compromise position, that's like I have no issues with that. Okay.
I think
Right.
it would help to make armies feel distinct from one another. It would help to lean into themes of armies, and it would enable, like someone mentioned earlier, one balancing lever.
Sure. Jen S said, I like the idea, but one seems tough to make thematic when you have armies like Gits. There are 3 armies in one. I don't know, Jen. Here's my Gits battle tactic. Get a unit destroyed this turn. Seems like everything in Gits would be really good at that. And I'm not saying that jokingly, by the way. I mean that 100% seriously. Okay? Like, sure.
Lose 15 or more models to Battle Shock this turn.
Like, that might be too goblin-y focused, right? Whereas just getting a unit destroyed, your squigs and even your trolls and your goblins all die pretty easily. Like, it's kind of a hallmark of that army. Okay. So you've got way too many here to keep track of. Instantly you create a lot of swinginess, right? Where you just either allow the army to easily go to 5 and complete it, or even a different case where there's just you get a bunch of bad ones that are stupid or completely random. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about worse in a different way. Okay, so here I've got the Auric War Clans, right, where you've got one generic time to get stuck in, where it's encouraging you to, in the first or second turn, effectively alpha strike your opponent. Okay, move your entire army to within 12 inches of them. Now there is an interesting mechanic on offer there of you can use this only in X or Y turn. That is a lever they could pull on more to make things kind of to do something interesting. I think there is value in that particular game element of like only in this particular turn may something be done. I would love to see that played with in the base GHB battle tactics. I think there's value there.
Definitely.
But so that's your generic. Run at them with your whole army, which, by the way, obviously, like Iron Jaws are way better at than Cruel Boys who want to sit back and shoot you. So it's still not truly generic, right? But okay, sure. Get everybody within 12 inches. It's just a wild battle tactic. And then everything else is army specific, right? Like Wait For It, Lads relies on Big Wah. Now, I understand Big Wah can actually reach into a couple of these depending on what's going on, maybe, but whatever. So it's like Wait For It, Lads. You got to have a bunch of Wah points, so only in Big Wah. Squish to Puny Gits is for Iron Jaws. Kill to Biggin is Bone Splitters. Take That Suckers is both very, very, very bad. And specifically Cruel Boys, just continuing on why Cruel Boys get to be the butt of every joke in that book, apparently. And then Destroyer of Empires, you can use if you're running Kragnos. Like, Jeezle Pete's. This army has effectively only 2 choices. For the most part. I understand that, again, big blah, blah, blah. But, like, and most are quite bad. Right? You're not getting anything here. Like, the world of difference between what got printed in Doc and what got printed here couldn't be farther apart, and neither of those are good. right? If these are to be useful. We wouldn't want either of these worlds if we're going to print them, right? And that's how most of these shake out. They're either way too good and autocomplete without interactivity, or way too bad. Because, spoiler alert, it's really hard to write these.
Yeah,
That's
definitely. Yeah, I was sitting down today trying to work on some and talk with Nick. Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, Nick, when I look at a lot of these faction-specific battle tactics, it just feels like the amount of effort that went into them was quite a bit. I may not be saying this in the right way, but generally there's a noticeable different feeling that I think one can easily get when looking at these specific ones as opposed to the universal ones. The universal ones are generally better. They have issues, but these. So I guess, Nick, your thought would be that, well, just put more work into trying to make these. If you're just doing one, right? You've got one shot, one target, and put more effort into making that one work as a universal battle tactic for that faction, for Sylvaneth, whatever, right? But you think that seems like a reasonable goal, a reasonable target, and that would, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure if that's a better world. I mean, certainly a better world, but is that still introducing too much potential for just still a net negative, as opposed to not doing that and just keep it focused on the universal ones?
I think ultimately they've proven that they struggle with balancing these, and so one ideal balanced one is what I would prefer. But if they can't manage that, then not having the
right
specific ones is a better solution than what it currently is. I think the balance, when we talk about the ones that are good, what we're really talking about is that they are guaranteed to complete, and I don't have to give up anything to do them. Right. Those are the two things we're talking about. That's our benchmark of a good thing. Anything else is garbage.
In terms of, like, quote unquote good, not good design, good like I'm going to use this, right? It gives me power. Yes.
Right. The strong ones, you're not going to fail them ever, or under normal circumstances, and you don't have to give up anything. They're just something you're going to do on the course of things. And I think I don't want to play around with the consistency. I don't want to have these be a random crapshoot of whether you succeed or not. I think the change that should be made is, what do I have to give up to accomplish them? And I think if they approach those book-specific ones and the core book ones in that method and said, these are going to be consistent, you're going to be able to complete them if you are willing to make the sacrifice required. You're going to move a unit somewhere it shouldn't be. You're going to have something die that you don't want to die. You're going to give up control of an objective. You're going to, whatever that might be, whatever fits in the theme of the army or fits in the core narrative that you're trying to construct with the core ones. As long as you're giving something up, so that when you fail it, it's because you choose not to give that up. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, that's really interesting. We should, and I'm sure we will. We should definitely talk more about that. But Vince, that really stood out to me when I was talking with Nick earlier today. This notion of opportunity cost. I hadn't been thinking about that enough in relation to battle tactics. I think that's really critical. Now, it's not necessarily that all of them need opportunity costs. I don't think necessarily, but maybe it's half of them. Maybe it's
It's another lever you can pull on, right? I think back, Tyler, to, again, schemes are not exactly applicable to battle tactics. But I think back to schemes, and I think about the scheme Map Maker. Do you remember Map Maker, Tyler?
Oh, yeah. Everybody hated it. Was that the one everybody hated? No, that's not true.
No. That was Banners Held High one is the one that everybody hated. Plant the Flag, because I was ahead of my time asking for totems and banner bearers and stuff. No, Map Maker was fun. I think most people enjoyed it. So the way Map Maker worked as a scheme, to complete it, was you had to have models. You had to have some model, not the same model, but some models in your army had to touch within an inch of all four corners of the map. Okay, so, like, all four corners had to be touched at some point in the game by your models, which was especially punishing on sort of the old bigger size boards, right? Because whatever. And some armies, and it was just interesting the choices people would make to complete that scheme. Like, they would take their ambushers, They're things that could come in from reserve, and have them coming in from the corner, sort of non-optimal positions, just dropping them there to complete that scheme, right? I remember I had a game where I was running like a Chaos Force, and I had Chaos Chariots, and I just started the 2 against the back right corners, like right here, and just spent the whole game running them, and then just got to the end up here. And like, that's not how I would have used those 2 units, right? Had it, like, it made me make a different choice. I played the game differently because of it, right? And and knew that, by the way, if somebody wanted to stop me from that, they could have come over there and killed my chariots or something, right? But then they would have had to move their pieces way out of where they wanted to have them be to go fight my chariot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways,
That's a good example.
These are good.
The schemes in this case were hidden from the opponent, right? So
right,
it might take
exactly.
them a while to figure out exactly what you're trying to accomplish and go to counter it. I like that idea, and I think that might be an interesting element of battle tactics too. If instead of declaring it at the start of the round, you concealed it at the start of the round.
There's a whole other sort of interesting sub-factions, hidden information versus public information in game design. There's a lot to unpack there, but it's an interesting element. All right, let's talk about the Tome Celestial, because good lord. All right, these are just even worse somehow. Okay, so this is the Seraphon one. Now look, I'm going to play the smallest violin in the world for Seraphon, okay? Obviously, they're like one of the most brutal armies in the meta. Thunder Lizards continues to be just running wild, like, over everything. But they have 2 in their article. They got 2. Again, Doc got 6, and 3 of those are just instantly completable, right? A lot of armies did not get many in their Tome Celestial. It's like 2 or 3 or something like that. But it still varies all over the shop, which I can't even wrap my head around that. Like, if we were going to introduce these, one would have thought the first thing we sat down and said in the design studio would have been, okay, we're going to put in army-specific battle tactics. So if I had been at the table, I would have been like, nope. But I wasn't, so we decided to do it. One would have thought the next thing that happened would have been, they said, all right, how many of these are we adding for each army? And they just locked in the number.
Roll a d6.
Okay.
Warhammer way.
Mm-hmm.
So, at any rate, there's 2. One of these 2 is just a harder version of an existing quote-unquote GHB one, right? The Stampede of Scales, where you pick 3 different friendly monsters and make them run and finish wholly within enemy territory. So, okay, it's just a harder version of the existing one. But, I mean, if you're playing Thunder Lizards and, I guess, getting stompy all over them, why not if your monsters are already over there? And if you have the tools at that moment, they're still 100% guaranteed. There's still, like, almost no interactivity here, right? Like, by the way, these are... the one of them you can only complete if you're Starborn, right? Like, if you are Coalesced, you can't do the top one. If you're Starborn, you could theoretically do both, even though it's supposed to be a Coalesced one. But there's nothing that, like, Starborn armies frequently contain monsters, so it's not that weird. So
I think that second one is interesting on a number of levels. I mean, to me, there is some potential opportunity cost introduced with that second one. You have to have 3 different monsters alive, and you're probably not doing that in the first battle round because it has to be wholly within enemy territory.
Sure.
And you have to run with them, which I think that one of the Bastillodons can run and shoot, but not...
You have a couple different run and charge mechanics in the book.
Okay. I thought... Yeah, when I played them...
You have run and shoot and run and charge mechanics.
Okay. So I've only
It's
seen
a very
where they've done
powerful
it
book.
for one. Yeah. I've played against 2 Bastillodons a lot, and they're usually just doing it with 1. But
Sure.
Either way, yeah, at least they're starting to introduce some of this opportunity cost, Nick, that you're talking about, at least in my opinion, with this one. Yeah, maybe still it's a little too easy.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think it's
Nick.
easy to add opportunity cost to a lot of these. Ferocious Advance is one where, except for a couple armies that just have crossword on certain turns, if you made it so Ferocious Advance couldn't be used in turns 1 or 5, you often would have a significant opportunity cost for running and holding hands. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, speaking to that like turn limitation, that actually is an interesting thing, right?
Right. No, I think that's very true. Yeah.
And again, I return back to the it's clearly hard to design these. And I don't mean that in any I don't mean that in any demeaning or joking way. These are really hard to write. They're a very, very difficult thing to get correct. Like when you're designing in any game space, there are certain things that are going to be easier to write and certain things that are harder to write. Okay? And something like this that's trying to meet such a high bar of being interactive, being skill testing, being something you don't complete all the time, it's actually some of the hardest stuff to write. Okay? Things that where you expect the player to actually fail sometime is really hard to get right. Okay? And that all these examples we've seen just prove why these are so hard, because they've just basically it's a cavalcade of failure in all of these expansion ones, right? And again, I'm not meaning to be mean to anybody who's working on these books or this stuff. It's just it's a bad idea that's implemented badly, and you're almost being asked to work outside the bounds of the possible. Like writing 8 compelling battle tactics is a difficult task. Writing 100 compelling battle tactics, I mean, you might as well jump and touch the moon. Like it's just not possible. Right? So, okay. Random chance. So this is in my mind is a whole other different kind of bad. Where these are out of the Sons of Bahamut book. One for effectively each giant type, sort of. The Wrecking Crew is actually generic, but whatever. But it's obviously more keyed to like the Gatebreaker, how it was concepted. Whatever, doesn't matter. Each one of these is crap because it's not interactivity. There's almost no interactivity with these, or counterplay or anything like that. But also they're not autocomplete. They're just roll a die, and based on the fickle outcome of that die, you either complete it or not. Right? Like, do you kick it? Do you kick the objective from wholly within your outside of your territory to wholly within? Well, depends on what you roll on 2d6, I guess. Right? And sure, sometimes you might have it in the exact spot where it's like, oh, it's 1 inch out, and so it's automatic. Like, yeah, sure, that could happen, I guess. I mean, a broken clock's right twice a day. That doesn't make it a good clock. All right. Again, demolishing terrain. So, okay, roll a 3 up. Cool beans. Good stuff. And the War Stomper Mega Gargant hurled body. If the enemy model you pick for the first part of this ability is slain, and an enemy battle line unit is picked as the target for the second part of the ability and suffers any mortal wounds. I need that meme lady of all the like, you know, mathematical equations going on. So to be clear, let's assume I grab somebody out of a 1 wound unit. Let's make it the most favorable situation possible. Like I'm going into like Empire Spearman, just some crap unit, right? Okay, I got to roll a 2 up to grab the dude. Okay, so that's not too bad, but it's still a random chance. I could fail on the 1 for no reason of my own failure. Then hurled bodies back to deal mortal wounds is a 4 up. And then they have to suffer the mortal wound. They have no mortal wound protection base, so let's assume if I get the 4 up, they take it, right? What a ridiculous battle tactic. These I just absolutely hate, where it's like, hey, maybe it completes, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Roll a die. Like, I understand that even the fighty ones are technically based on die rolls, you know, because you're going to kill something and you could have a bad turn of dice rolls. But the law of large numbers is somewhat kicking in there. I can do things to manipulate that, right? If I know I've called the ball on broken ranks, I'm going to drill that unit with everything I've got, right? I'm going to cast spells into it. I'm going to throw an arcane bolt at it even. You know, I'm going to do everything, right? I'm just going to start drilling that thing with everything I've got. I'm going to all-out attack my unit. I'm going to double charge them. I can minimize or interact with the randomness of achieving that objective. There's nothing I can do here. This is just the dice. It happens or it doesn't. Deal with that. Right?
I think the most difficult element of this is hitting that world where you're expecting people to be 60% on their completion, right? You're expecting them to fail some while avoiding this. And because I agree with you, this is the worst possibility. You want people to have control over it, but you need to avoid this situation where it's just a random chance whether you're failing, and who gets more is up to the dice.
Yeah. Yeah, these are like just the worst version of this. So, good stuff. I mean, again, Sons of Bahamut is whatever. But like I think a lot of people probably don't have much sympathy for that army after it spent the better part of the beginning of 3.0 just literally war stomping all over everyone. And even though it's come certainly down now in competitiveness, it's often still a very unfun army to play against. So because it's a badly designed book, as I said when it came out originally, and I continue to say to this day. Let me rewrite it, and I'll give you a good book. We might do that show at some point. We might do Vince rewrites the Sons of Bahamut book. Would people be interested in that? Would people be interested in watching me in me doing a book rewrite? Like, I would obviously have it pre-written before the show, but tell me if you're interested in that. Should I rewrite the Sons of Battletome book and do a show on it? A complete ego trip show. That's all that is. That's just me flexing my ego. So if you think that's interesting, cool, tell me right now in the chat or put it in the comments below if you're watching this later. Okay. I'm just curious whether or not people would enjoy that. All right. But wait, it gets worse. So here's my final question I want to end on. Are these all just extra weight? And here's what I mean. There's a lot of good to this, and we've talked about all the positives. But Doug is voting for it for the SOB book. Well, then if Doug wants it, I got to do it. That's it right there. But I like these. I think they're valuable and valid. I want to be super clear. Okay? But are they necessary to be part of the game in every battle pack? Okay? And my answer is no. That, like, the core battle pack shouldn't need these. Like, we played in... if you played the Seasons of War missions, there's no objectives. No objectives on those tables. Okay? So we showed we can write... Now, there's a lot of interesting battle tactic stuff going on. But we showed that we can do a battle pack in scenarios without objectives. It seems like the base experience and what's offered on core, like for getting people in, shouldn't have this layer. I would cut multiple layers from the starter battle pack, right? But this is one of them. I'm not like for competitive play, for tournament play, these things seem so valid, valuable, and interesting if written well and you've got a good selection. And getting rid of the army specific ones. But it feels like there should be a starter battle pack. That's what's missing right now. We haven't used the battle pack technology to its fullest potential. Why? If that's what they intended with the core one, it ain't that, homie. Try again. Right? There should be literally a new player battle pack that comes with 3 to 6 missions, cuts a lot of rules out of the expectations. Like, in this battle pack, we don't use battle tactics or this or this or this or whatever, and allows people a play mode that doesn't have this as part of it. And then what we should focus on is, for the competitive play, let's write 6 to 8 good, solid battle tactics, right? And make these things that are really interactive, skill testing, fun, with sometimes opportunity costs that speak to actually differentiating in the game. That's the two goals, right? Then we've got a good new player on ramp, and then they can graduate to the competitive play one. So the tournament players have what they need. The new people, or just casuals who don't want to mess with it, have what they need. Everybody's a winner. Battle packs let us do that, right? So why doesn't this exist?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense to me.
Like, I don't want to cut from anyone. We don't need to. We don't need to remove these from the game, right? When I saw your Twitter mentions of, like, I hate them, I love them, boo, yay, right? I was like, why aren't we serving both of these audiences in the right way? Right? We just have an underserved market here. This is nothing but this is a simple econ problem, right? So I think that's probably could be a fun thing for the community to create, frankly. Tyler, you seem pretty good at writing battle plans. You wrote 4 of them. They're all good. Maybe maybe the starter battle pack is something you need to work on next.
Interesting. No, it is an interesting idea. Yeah, the what's in the core rules is not cutting it. That's for sure. So yeah, I have to think on that.
Yeah.
I think
Nick?
generally
Yeah.
when you start playing with somebody who's never played before, you're doing a lot of these things anyway. You're right. You're tailoring a make-believe battle pack, excluding a lot of the complexity that they don't need to learn the game, and getting through the game with them. It would be nice to have that in some kind of formalized way, so that if you've got 2 new players, for example, and one of them doesn't know what's kind of the needless cruft, and then you've got some reference that you can dig through together.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way you just said it there, Nick. Yeah, that resonates a lot. You know, we are having new players that are coming out Tuesdays. That's hobby night, right? And it feels like it feels kind of heavy, trying to like a heavy weight to try to pick up and introduce this game to new players sometimes. Just because it's like you have to. Well, it's not set. There's not a path. I know maybe somebody's come up with this and I haven't seen the community, but like here's a slim down. What you guys just said. Here's a slim down version of the game you use to introduce new players, right? Would love to have something like that. It gives me like, do we redeploy? Like, do I look at the cheat sheet that Austin Weird Knobs put together and I cut out half of it? I cut out the battle tactics. I cut out like all this crap. Like, I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it. I haven't seen anybody put together something like that. That would be pretty interesting. Not
Yeah,
just
and I think what you said, Nick, is so correct. Like that, there'd be a shared reference. People would know. You can just look at it, right, and be like, "Oh yeah, okay, cool. I understand. This is the thing. This is what we're doing. Got it." Right? Again, it feels like a thing that should exist. And if they're not going to write it, maybe we need to write it. That's what it comes down to.
It's probably pretty straightforward too, just in terms of these decisions. What cuts and what stays.
Yeah.
Probably pretty straightforward. You can probably figure that out pretty quickly.
Right. I mean, because Dick, I agree exactly what you said. When you show new people, you often just ignore certain elements anyways because you know it's going to be too much. Like just right into the battle pack that those aren't there.
Right. Yeah, but it would definitely be nice to have some centered, or to have a set of rails, set of guidelines for folks. Interesting.
Yep. Yeah, I agree, Chase, and like it would just be, it just feels like a thing that should be out there. So I hope we see that at some point. Maybe Tyler, you and I will talk. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
We got a lot on our mutual plates.
Yeah.
But we'll see what we can. We'll see. All right. Can we do better? This is the question. I don't know. Can we do better? I took a shot at it. Here we go. So, gentlemen, here's my list. Here's my list of 8. I made 8. Okay.
I'm still really interested in having more conversation. Again, as usual with me, the decisions before the decisions on this, but maybe we can go through it and then we can get into some of that.
Yeah, because I have it down in here. Like it's I'll invert for you there, Tyler, but it's there. Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Why did I pick the? So I decided to sit down. Yes, as Thanos said, fine, I'll do it myself. That's right, exactly. Ever a wise one, that Thanos. Okay, so I decided to sit down and try to say, what would my 8 be? And why? Now, what were my guiding principles for this? Well, it's everything we've talked about already earlier, Tyler, right? Focusing on things like interactive, orthogonal goals. Not all, but some, right? Now, and no bonus points, skill testing where we can, but also some other little items you'll see here that I like, that are sort of small items. Okay, you'll get it. All right, so let's talk about what stays. Broken ranks, slay the warlord, and conquer. Now, I know, Nick, you were anti-conquer. The reason I kept conquer in as this one, I do agree it is a hat on a hat. Like, I even wrote that there, but I think it's a minimal amount of hat on a hat, right? It does at least encourage trading which is kind of an interesting thing that happens where it's like they stretch to get one and then you punish them for their stretching and take it back from them, right? So I don't disagree with anything you said there. It is just operating along the base goals, but it is an interesting soft incentive against stretching out and just like, oh, I'll grab this thing real quick to get my 3 points. You end up paying more for that in return, right? By handing them that, which is kind of interesting.
And I don't think it's bad to have one battle tactic that fits in this mold of take an objective.
Right, and that's the only one.
Right. What I don't like is having effectively 3, right? Monsters
Right.
Takeover, Expansion, and Conquer, all fitting in that role of taking objectives.
Yep, exactly. I kept one. That one's simple, so I kept it. Broken Ranks and Slay the Warlord stayed because to me, they do push some on kill, which we want a little of, right? We talked about how like the more you push kill, the more you empower shooting. But like, look, let's be honest. This game is about taking your toys and killing the other person's toys, right? So let's, it's good to have a little bit of that in there. Again, there's got to be some variability. And so, like, they allow... Plus, these two really allow counterplay, right? Mm-hmm. Like, Broken Ranks and Slay the Warlord, you've got things you can do. You can... Yes, you can redeploy away. You can... Even if it's shooting, you can all-out defense. There's things you can do against them. Maybe they're not the best things, but the story I told earlier about Nathan and the Ard Boys off turn, right? Like, there's stuff. And I think those are both fun. They do often come down to very tense moments. Like, how many times have you either achieved or failed Broken Ranks by 1 wound?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not every time, but it's happened. And you're like,
in particular.
Yeah, sure. You're like, oh, what a moment, right? Like, it's such a great moment when it happens. So I think those are valid to stay in there. Okay, cool. Secure the center. I stole this one from the base list. I actually really like it. Now, how good this is really matters about where the objectives are in the particular battle pack you're currently playing in, right?
I think we're about half. We're about half right now.
Yeah, not enough
Maybe
of them
a little,
don't have
maybe
in
a
the
little
center.
less.
But the more you spread out around and don't have one in the dead center point, the better this is. I'm kind of like hoping that the next one doesn't have as much in the center and kind of spreads more out around, Savage Game style or Feral Foray style or whatever. I don't mind a few of them being overlapped, but yeah.
That's not too bad though. Like looking, like I said, I quickly when we were talking about it earlier, went through it, and it was somewhere around half or maybe a little under half did not have an objective in the center. I think that's pretty intriguing. In terms of battle tactics. So, yeah.
Again, moving to an area that's not objective, pulling your army apart, being in a different place. I like that concept. It's cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even in battle plans where one is in the center, it means that both armies are more heavily pushed to contest that center objectives than they otherwise would be. It creates another incentive to focus in that spot. And so I don't hate it from that point of view.
Without being about the objective itself. Right. Yeah.
Right.
It's almost incidental that the objective happens to be there or not. Yeah. Agreed. Now I have my 2 win for losing. Okay. I like win for losing mechanics. I think they're really good. Win for losing mechanics shouldn't be everything. You can overplay your hand on that, right? Mm-hmm. But one of the best things you can do as like a GM in role-playing games is learn that your players should win for losing. What I mean by that is like, oh, they lost, but it's not, they don't die. It's not the end of the story. It's just new challenges arrive, right? And so that there's consequences and interesting things occur, right? And I think this is the same here. It's one of the reasons, the thing I've always loved about the Blood Tithe mechanic and why I think it's so good is you lose a unit and you're like, I lost a unit. Oh, but I get a Blood Tithe, right? It's like, yay. Right, it's a rebate. It's cool. It's not as good as the thing, but it's something, right? So
I've never literally met a glass half empty corn player. It's
right, yeah, exactly. They're all in it's all half full of blood. That's what all their glasses are full of. So the full measure is choose a friendly unit. That unit must be like, again, please don't. I'm not writing the actual rules text here, folks. So don't beat me up on the rules text. Like I only have so much space on a slide. I'm writing a short version of it so you get the idea of the thing. Choose a friendly unit. That unit must be slain by the end of the turn. Get one of your own units killed. Right? Cool. And then traitor, choose a friendly hero. That unit must be slain by the end of the turn, right? Which I love the narrative of. I like these when they're more obvious, when you can speak to the narrative of them. And something like traitor is just writing that word. It's way more obvious what you're doing. Like the whole story is in that one word, right? Like one of your heroes, you discovered they're a traitor. Time to get them killed, right? So maybe it's my cold Skaven heart that that loves that concept. So I like the win for losing. I like having two of these in there, one for just kind of a unit and one for a hero. By the way, we could put other stuff on that unit, because I mean that should probably be like choose a friendly non-hero unit. You get the idea. But again, I'm not writing these for proper rules text. In my head, I'm thinking of just like some unit.
Traitor should probably have that same restriction where it's not your general, a hero that's not your general. Just so you're not double dipping on killing your own general and denying Slay the Warlord.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely right. King of the Hill. Choose a single piece of terrain wholly within enemy territory. You must control that terrain at the end of your turn. Right? Again, often given the way tables are constructed for tournaments, you're basically guaranteed to have no objective on that terrain for the most part. That's how a lot of tournaments structure their terrain, to be like not having objectives directly on them. So you're kind of having to move onto a piece of terrain into their territory and actually control it. So it's kind of like Secure the Center. It's moving you to a weird location. It's moving you to a location where there's almost guaranteed not to be an objective you want to control, right? And it's pulling you apart in an interesting way.
We could quibble about the details of this. Is it wholly outside of your territory, or is it within, as opposed to wholly within enemy territory, in terms of like Vault Wars had some big terrain pieces, right?
Sure.
And I couldn't tell you offhand whether the percentages of how challenging this would have been across the 20 tables of Vault Wars. That definitely would be something I would have been eyeing if with this text in mind as one of the universal battle tactics. But yeah, you know what I'm saying, Vince. Like we could
totally
look at the details of this. Yeah,
100%. Like I could see it being exactly as you said, out. Not within your territory or wholly outside of your territory or something like that. Yeah, sure, absolutely, right. And fine. Like I think it could still be perfectly valid, right? It's
a cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Conceptually, it's good. Get to the hill, take the hill. We all understand. We want to own the hill, right? Like it's a thing. And then Vendetta is my last one. Choose an enemy unit that has slain a friendly model. You complete this tactic if that unit is destroyed this turn. Now, why that's a kill mechanic, but it's a little different, right? The reason I like this one is because it's automatically gated without using the turn mechanic. Right? It is a little more kill, but it's unit agnostic. It's not battle line or whatever. But it rewards counterpunch as opposed to alpha strike, right? Like Broken Ranks and Slay the Warlord reward you going out and alpha striking them. You can do them turn one if you wanted to, right? Like you could just knock them down, set them up, knock them down. Vendetta has a gate, right? You can't actually do Vendetta until they slay something of yours, right? And so... Oh, Gareth said, King of the Hill, add that the territory can't be smashed. Give some counterplay. Destroy it with a monster action. That's a cool idea, Gareth. I like that. That's definitely a good idea. Yeah. Good counterplay call right there. Yeah. So again, this was just my first shot across the bow. This is my initial draft. And all this feedback has been exactly the kind of stuff you would do if you were going to actually make these real, right? You'd talk about them, figure out how do we actually build in the right counterplay? Do we put in turn limiters or something like that, right? But that kind of stuff where you're pulling and pushing on different measures. So this was my list, and I felt like this, from a conceptual standpoint, met the bar. It can be refined, it could be improved, no doubt. But I feel like it's a better place. Like if I had these 8, I'd be like, all right, we got a game here. Let's do something. Right.
Yeah. So the breakdown. Let's see. So you've got Broken Ranks, Slay the Warlord, kill mechanics. You've got an objective hold mechanic. You've got Secure the Center, that can be overlapping with objective holding, but generally it's intended differently as positioning kind of where you are on the battlefield, moving to a spot. Measure, just kind of going through this one. The choose friendly unit must be slain. Okay. Okay, so win for losing, that would be in your mind, yeah, a different category for these two.
Mm-hmm.
King of the Hill is another positioning. Vendetta is kind of a little bit of kill, a little bit of something else.
Yep. A
And
little bit of counterpunch, punish them for overextending, for alpha striking you, that kind of thing, right?
uh,
So if this
yeah,
was your date, how many would you expect to complete in an average game with an average army?
Yeah, it's a question. Like, have I gotten us to a point where you could do where like suddenly three would become the average? I don't know. I don't know is my honest answer. Like, I might need to put more governor switches on
I
some of these or something like that.
I doubt it. Yeah, I doubt we're there yet.
Right.
Uh,
I feel like this is certainly harder than there because I don't just have like the run three. I automatically get these two. You know what I mean? Like there are still
right.
things I would feel pretty confident I would achieve, but there's these. What I can say is these are harder than the 8 on offer from the core book right now. That I can say.
Mhm.
I think something Tyler brought up earlier is that you need something that is compelling and manageable in turn one for both armies, especially top of turn one. Um, and that's a tricky one.
Mhm.
Right?
Potentially, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could go, of course, Nick, in the direction of that's the round where you get a higher percentage of your fails.
Sure.
Is that round one. Now, if you were going to lean into that, yeah, you would then within that space need to choose carefully so that you're not having a disproportional benefit to shooting, blah blah blah, everything that we've previously talked about, right? You're not disproportionately disadvantaging or advantaging highly mobile armies. Yeah, I mean, I think you could go in that direction as well. I'm not sure what that would look like offhand, but yeah. Uh, so, Nick, I know you had a lot of thoughts on, opportunity cost. We've talked a lot about a number of different ways. Real quickly, while I'm thinking about it, Konstantinos, he had mentioned in the Twitter thread an
Oh yeah,
idea
yeah. He
about,
had some real fun ones. Yeah.
yeah, some good ones. Yeah, the one that really stood out to me was this notion of, I think it was basically you cannot use any command points in a turn, but it cannot be round one or round five.
Yeah, so
Which,
he was leaning into the opportunity cost, Nick, like you like. Yeah, his was you complete this tactic if you don't use any CPs this turn. Can't be used on turn 1 or 5. Right? Something like that. It's a cool idea. Um he had um uh he had one that was I actually don't like his serious ones. I like his cheeky ones.
yeah, the
Like have a
one.
unit or two retreat onto an objective and take it. Maybe the units they retreated from must survive the turn, could reward planning armies and not as strong units, that kind of thing. Like, I didn't touch on the win for retreating, but that could be another kind of win for losing one that weaker armies could do, right? Where you retreat away and
Mhm.
take stuff. That's another thread you could pull on.
An easy one that came to mind earlier is lose control of an objective you control this turn, which
Oh
involves you
yeah,
either
sure.
an objective or retreating off of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You don't technically you'd have to phrase it like do not contest an objective you control this turn or something like that, right? Because you don't actually lose
Mm.
control of it when you walk away from it, but you have to be actively there to be contesting
Well,
it. So, but
you
yes.
do lose control of it if the opponent is there, right?
That's a good point. Okay, yeah, sure. Sure, sure. When it checks. Yeah, that's fine. Good call.
Yeah,
Good
at
call.
the end of this
Okay.
turn, we check.
Yeah, you're right. No, that would work. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I was
Uh,
thinking of an empty objective, but yes, you're right.
Having something like two wizards not cast spells or
Sure.
priests not pray.
Yeah, we had a scheme that was all about like completing a ritual where you had to do it over multiple rounds or something like that. And the
Mhm.
idea that you're trying to do like a big ritual that requires them to like build up and not cast for a turn or two or not pray for a turn or two is kind of an interesting conceptual space you could play in that like
Yeah.
would narratively make sense what's going on, right? So sure. Yeah.
I really love those multi-turn setups as
Sure.
well because that just opens up so much counterplay when you've got to. You maybe don't declare it in the first turn, but it's obvious that you didn't do something. You didn't cast any spells with your
Right.
wizards, so your
Mhm.
opponent knows you're going for that in the next turn, and they can try to interrupt that plan.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about that too, Nick. Yeah, earlier. Yeah, I mean, one that immediately came to mind was pick a friendly unit that destroyed, killed an enemy unit through an ability or attack, however you need to word it, to cover your bases in your previous turn, they must kill an enemy unit in this turn. But yeah, I mean, you're right. That's a big sandbox in terms of some options that we'd have to play there. And it could potentially, as you said, give your opponent the chance to interrupt the sequence. I think that's a pretty intriguing one, I think. Yeah, that seems like a very interesting space. Nick, you were telling me about actions in 40K. Could you say a little bit about that and how you think about that in relation to all this?
I'm very much not a 40K expert, but 40K secondaries have the concept of actions where a unit goes to some specific place and then gives up their shooting and charging for the turn in order to complete this action, whether it's raising a flag or completing some.
They're doing a thing, basically.
They're doing a thing. They're giving up what they would otherwise be doing in order to do a thing.
Yeah.
And I think they typically have to do it in either near an objective or near the center of the board, so that they're making themselves vulnerable and then trying to accomplish this task. That is just more of that opportunity cost feeling. You're giving up actions you would like to be taking in order to further some separate goal in the game.
And I think there's a lot of space you could explore there. I do think it's one of those things you got to be careful, as with all of these, right? The part of the key to this is having a good mix. Having like 4 of them that all required a heavy opportunity cost is probably too much, right?
Sure.
Because then people are playing like they're going to feel like they're not actually playing their army, right? So it's about finding that right mix where it's like, oh, 1 or 2, you do this. Cool. Now it's an interesting thing that you like. It is less interactive, but carries its own innate cost to you, right? So that can be a way to sort of balance it out. There's just a lot of there is space to play in here for how you would structure your right 8. So there you go. Okay, cool. Let's go on. Conclusions. What are we doing here? Okay. All right. Here's my conclusions, and I welcome all of your thoughts, gentlemen. Okay. Conclusions. I'm timestamping this. There we go. The idea of these things are good. They have real value in competitive play, especially tournaments, theoretically. Even maybe not even theoretically. Like in play, a lot of people really enjoy these. They should be there, but we want them to be a good list that's as useful and interesting and interactive and skill testing as possible. To be interesting, they should have counterplay, even if small, and skill test, even if small. Right? They should carry some. They should be making you make it, as you said very very wisely, Nick. They should be making you make a decision, a real decision. Right? That's what it boils down to. You should be making some kind of active decision. There should be a small controlled number that all players share. That way they're a known quantity. 100 of these are unknowable and impossible to counterplay against except in the exact moment. It ruins everything good about it. And they should be battle pack dependent, and we should have battle packs that don't use them. Just like we have, and by the way, that's not the tournament player pack. Fine. It's for other people. So that's my conclusions. What did I miss? Nick, what any other conclusions that you came to?
I came to the conclusion that people feel way more passionately about battle tactics than I any understanding of.
Yeah.
But I think that summarizes it well. I really love that they're part of the game. I think they were the best positive change for 3rd edition was the ability for armies to play in a different way than 1. And just adding that to the game, providing that as an option that they can continue to expand on, I think is fantastic. But there's just these obvious flaws with the system as it exists now. One thing that gives me a little bit of hope about the system is that if I wanted to design a set of battle tactics that were as simple as possible for a 2nd edition player to pick up and understand, we would get the core rulebook battle tactics. A 2nd edition player is going to kill models and take objectives. So here's 6 battle tactics that are for killing models and taking objectives. this allows someone coming to the game to pick it up very quickly if they're a second edition player. But hopefully in this new General's Handbook, they're going to explore the space a lot more and get a much better set of them. And unfortunately, I think the custom ones may ruin that best in effort. But
I have a solution. TOs in your own personal battle packs that you run for your tournaments, say you do not allow any battle tactics beyond faction-specific battle tactics. You allow the ones in the current battle pack only, like the current GHB battle pack you are using only. Easy solution. If some players get angry at you, too bad. You just, I mean, like, I cannot. I've been to multiple tournaments where the TOs did that, like actually just said we're only using the base battle tactics, and you know what? It was great. It was great. I was like, this is wonderful. I don't think anybody complained because it was a better time for everyone. Yay! Right? Like, where's the problem here? Let them be a thing for people who want to use them in their home games or narrative games or whatever. If you feel like that's the thing you want to do. The other ones, in my estimation, have no place in tournament play. None. They ruin what's otherwise a good system. So, Tyler?
Yeah, I was curious if you guys have any more thoughts on one piece that we discussed early on. You know, I mentioned that I have heard from a number of players over this first year that they struggle with battle tactics. The standpoint of, I was using the term realism, and you mentioned appropriately the verisimilitude is what we're really talking about here. You know, that some of them are Warhammer fantasy players, some of them are both Warhammer Fantasy and AOS, and some of them are just AOS 1.0, 2.0 players. So it's been a mix.
Sure.
And but some of what they've told me is similar, and it's this feeling that a number of them expressed of arbitrariness to some of these things, that it feels arbitrary to have to go do this other thing with this unit that runs contrary to their story, their perception going on in their head about what their army is there to do, right, in a game of Age of Sigmar. I've heard this a number of times over this last year. I just didn't, if you guys had any, like I said, that hasn't really occurred to me. I don't really see that issue and how I think about it, but that's why I mentioned this whole notion of feeling like there's insufficient context grounding given to why we're doing this in the first place on a few levels. But did you guys have any thoughts on that?
Nick, you got any thoughts?
I think there are a couple of them that are obvious problems there, right? You know, run is the one that most often when you call it, you ferocious advance, it doesn't feel like what the theme of it seems that it should be. Oftentimes they're running by staying in place, and you've just checked a box, and
right.
You carry on and you get your 2 points. But I think if they're appropriately tied to very thematic things, like your King of the Hill example, Vince, right. I think is perfect in this. It's very easy to understand why an army needs to control a piece of terrain in enemy territory, right? Very easy to understand why this is part of the battle that's going on. I think doing things, we didn't really talk about it, but certain battle plans could have specific battle tactics associated with
yeah, sure.
Into the theme of that. And I think if you did that appropriately, I think that solves a lot of that problem.
Yeah.
There might be examples of armies that narratively this one kind of doesn't make sense, whatever that is.
Yeah, I'd almost rather see something like 6 base and you know, half of the scenarios have a unique battle tactic you can do in them or something like that, right? Or something like that. Or maybe they all have one unique battle tactic you can do, or something, whatever. Like, you can pick the numbers that make the most sense, right? But somewhere like that.
But I think if you picked the right set of them, I think it would address a lot of that problem.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, they could also just, like, you can do a lot in a name. They could also do a lot with a little bit of flavor text right above them or something like that, you know?
That helped a lot with the schemes that we did. Yeah, I thought.
Because we had, like, the little flavor text on every one of them. What are you on about here? What are we doing? I don't think it's that hard. So.
Totally. Yeah.
They do it with everything else. Every war scroll has flavor text for every ability on it.
Right. Every battle plan, and
Yeah, they all have. They all like they're generally really good at grounding us in like, well, what's going on? How's this thing do? I mean, they're also propagandists. If you read some of the War Scrolls, and that the War Scrolls read like the deadliest unit. They cleave their way through their foes, destroying all in their wake. Wait, who am I reading this for? Oh, Slangor Fiendbloods. Oh, you liars. But anyways, yeah, it's still good. It's still a cool thing. So, all right. So there we go. Did we miss anything, folks? What do you think? Drop it down in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, do all those fun things. Hitting buttons is cool. You want to be cool, don't you? You know you want to be cool. So do all that. All the things we mentioned during Pick of the Week, don't forget links are down there. Go check that stuff out. Patreon link is down there as well if you want to support the channel. It's so focused on your hobby and review and feedback, and comes with a really cool Discord community. So if you're interested in joining up, you can find that link down there, as is the merch store. That's also down there with all your fun Warhammer Weekly gear, and you can say whether you're Team Tyler or Team Tom. So,
Still
as
doing
always...
that? I thought we were
What's
done with that. We're still doing that, apparently? Huh,
Oh, we're still
interesting.
doing that. Yeah. It's always still on. It's always on. At any rate, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. As always, we'll see you next Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.